Can any bike go bike packing? This is a question that I've been getting for years now, and I've been doing my best to answer it. I've made videos like, can you go bike packing on a full suspension bike? Can you go bike packing on a road bike? But in this video, I want to go into more detail and basically show you how any bike can go bike packing with the right modifications. Over the years, I've gone bike packing on loads of different bikes, and I've found ways to make it work, either by finding some weird and wonderful products that overcome a bit of a pain point that that bike has, or by thinking a little bit more outside the box. So in this video, I'm going to give you loads of different examples of ways that you can set up your bike to go bike packing and hopefully give you a bit of inspiration. If you're in a tricky situation where you feel like you can't quite get your setup right on the bike that you have got, and you're torn between going out and actually buying a new bike for bike packing or just using the one you've got, hopefully this video will give you a bit more insight into how you can make it work. Now, it's worth me caveating, all bikes have inherent limitations. So if you're looking at turning a road bike into a fully fledged off-road machine, chances are it's not going to happen. And even if you could, the amount of changes that you'd have to make will soon add up cost-wise, and it will end up not being cost-effective. You may as well just go out and buy a new bike if that's the case. So I'm going to show you how to optimize the bike that you've got for bike packing, but within its limits. The first piece of advice I can give you is to take a step back, look at the setup that you've got, and think about what sort of bike packing are you actually going to be doing. If you're just looking at going on a minimal tour from hotel to hotel in the summertime, carrying a very small amount of gear, chances are you probably don't need to make any significant changes. But if you're wanting to go on longer tours, carry more stuff, maybe in all seasons, then this video is going to show you a few examples of ways that you can make that happen.
Let's start with this. It's a simple aluminium road bike with no mounts at all, making it difficult to carry lots of stuff. You could always use old-fashioned bike packing bags, a saddle bag, or a front roll-up bag, and a frame bag. If you want to add more luggage capacity, then you have several options. The first is getting a clamp-on rack like this Topeak Tetra rack. This can be clamped on the frame at the seat stays, and they also have a version for forks. And these are pretty simple, reasonably inexpensive, and can be taken on and off with relative ease. However, you can't carry a huge weight with them without them slipping, and they can potentially damage your frame. They're not suitable for carbon. Having said that, I've used mine all over the world and definitely exceeded the weight capacity many times, and I haven't had too many problems. Another option is a seat post mounted rack, like this Topeak beam rack. You can even buy these side pannier bits, meaning that you can attach some pretty hefty panniers on here if you want to. These are really easy to take on and off, but again, you are limited with the weight, and to make it strong, the rack itself is pretty heavy. You also have the added annoyance of it potentially slipping and turning around the seat post, because that's the only place that it's mounted. But again, if you're sensible, this can be a really good way of carrying some additional luggage. Other options, if you have carbon frames or you want to carry even more stuff, are axle mounted racks like this Old Man Mountain Elkhorn rack, or the Divide rack you can see here. Now granted, this one isn't attached to the axle, but you can get an adapter just like this that you can fit into your bike, and it effectively adds additional mounts around the axle where you can then screw in the rack. This works really well on most modern bikes, as most of them have through axles, and you can carry a surprising amount of weight with this. You then attach the top of the rack to the seat stays using these pucks, or if you want extra stability, or in some cases if you find your bike's only got one set of pannier mounts, like my Sonda Frontier, then you can use a seat post clamp with added pannier mounts. This is, as it sounds, a seat post clamp where you can screw the top of a pannier rack to it. Even if you have mounts, this can be a good way of freeing up some attachment points on the bike. At the higher end of things, you have systems like the tail fin rack, which can be mounted to through axles or quick release, giving you a trunk bag and pannier mounts if you need them. These are really high quality, but they are quite expensive. A lot of bikes nowadays have mounts on the front fork, but most older bikes or road bikes don't. So if you want to carry extra stuff here, you can use something like this. This is an Old Man Mountain axle pack. Like the racks we just looked at, it screws into the through axle with a special mount, and then you fasten it to the frames with zip ties. It's basically a strong piece of metal with screw mounts, meaning you can attach cages or bags like I've done here. If you use a mixture of the rear and front axle mounts, you're able to carry absolutely loads. Moving on to full suspension bikes, and the difficulty here is threefold. Full suspension bikes tend to have really tiny frame triangles that also compresses under load, meaning you're very limited with small frame bags. They also don't have any rear pannier mounts. The added drawback is having suspension, meaning you can't mount things to the front either. You could just use a front roll-up bag or a rear saddle bag, depending on the size of your frame. If you have a really small bike, you might find that your rear saddlebag actually rubs on the tyre when you compress the suspension. So again, you can use a rear clamp-on rack like the Tetra rack, or something like this, the Aero Spider rack, which has become very popular recently. But realistically, if you're wanting to carry lots of weight, you're going to need a rack like the Tailfin rack, something that is hinged that moves with the rear triangle and the suspension. It clips onto the through axle and then is attached to the bottom of the seat post, meaning you can also use this with a dropper. This is it in its finished form, and it does look pretty cool, I must say. But what do you do about the front suspension? For years I've been using the Tailfin suspension mounts. These are basically clamps that grip onto the bottom of the forks, and from there you can attach cages or water bottles, and I've been using these for years in all kinds of terrain, and they've been incredibly reliable. I want to talk about top tube bags. You can fit these to any bike, but they usually are pretty small. Having said that, nowadays there are bigger ones coming out on the market. This is a no-brainer to fit to your bike in my opinion, for things like tools, spares and repairs, but you're not going to be able to carry anything substantial. Moving on to frame bags, there are basically two types, off the peg and custom. You might get lucky like me and buy a set-sized frame bag that fits perfectly onto your bike. You might find though that there's a bit of a gap, it doesn't use the space efficiently. Personally, I would recommend going for a full custom frame bag like this one from Alpkit. You basically just send in the measurements of your frame triangle and they'll do the rest. You can add special features like I've done for a separate pocket for my passport and reflective strips along the side. It's definitely more expensive, but I'd say it's worth the money. This Alpkit Stingray frame bag has a 25-year warranty on it, so I'm pretty confident it's going to last me a long time. Thinking about the front of the bike, I definitely recommend going for a front roll-up bag, but it can be a challenge when you've got a road bike to squeeze it in between the drops. A relatively inexpensive upgrade is to get some flared bars like these, meaning that you've got a little bit more space to work with. Or if you want in different positions, you could just get some aero bars and switch between these and the hoods for different positions. If you've got a straight bar like a mountain bike, you can usually take a lot more stuff. But if you are going to be like me and get an absolutely massive roll-up bag, you probably need a rack as well. If you don't like roll-up bags, you can get these clip-on touring style bags like these Top Eat ones, and they come in all kinds of sizes. They're more of a cuboid shape, which can have its advantages, and they're quick release, so you can take them on and off easily. Personally, I prefer a rear rack to a rear saddle bag. You get much more stability with the rack, it doesn't wobble, and the centre of gravity is lower, meaning it's a much more responsive ride. What do you do if none of this will work for you? Let's look at another crazy bike. This is an Aniwow AW16. It's the world's smallest 16-inch foldable bike. And because it needs to fold, it really does limit what you can attach to it and how much stuff you can carry. I've attached an Alpkit Batonga fork bag to this using some Tailfin suspension mounts and a passport cage. I just clamped these onto the steering column and played around with it to make sure that I could still operate the lever and collapse it with no problems. Now granted, this isn't a lot of stuff, but it's nice to have some stuff on the bike at least. I took this bike bikepacking, and for that I used a Burley Travoy trailer. It allowed me to carry all the stuff that I needed, including all of my camping and filming gear, and all I needed was a seat post attachment. If you're really struggling for ideas, then actually using a trailer can be a really good option. It also meant I could collapse the bike down, stick it in the trailer and take it on the bus, which I can't normally do here with other bikes. Now granted, it is going to be slow and it is going to be heavy, but if you're going bikepacking on a bike like this, you're probably a bit nuts. Having said that though, trailers are a really good option if you simply can't take enough stuff with you. I've been using one for years since having my children, and you can be creative with these and attach bags to them as well if you need to.
So those are my ways of making any bike suitable for bikepacking. There are loads of other products out there on the market that tackle specific pain points that each bike has, and I haven't used them all. So if you have any recommendations of things that you found helpful to get you that perfect bikepacking setup, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.